Today, there are more than 8 billion people on Earth. Fast forward to 2050, and that number is expected to jump to 9.7 billion, according to estimates by the United Nations. Already, scientists are ringing the alarm bell about the growing challenges facing the agriculture industry. In many areas, this sector is already overburdened, leading to shortages and higher food prices. As a consequence, more people are going hungry. Today, global food insecurity affects about 824 million people. In the U.S., 18 million Americans can't afford enough safe and nutritious food. That's according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. To meet these challenges head-on, food scientists like Lenore Newman are focused on creating new food production processes that are more sustainable and accessible. She notes that the current food production model is not built to handle the future demands of a larger population.
Really, we're in a bit of trouble on a few fronts, and notwithstanding wars and pandemics, we just really use too much of the Earth's capacity to produce food. About 40% of the Earth's land surface is used to produce food.
Newman is a food scientist and the director of the Food and Agriculture Institute at the University of the Fraser Valley in British Columbia, Canada. She says a large chunk of agricultural land is used to produce animal protein, which is extremely inefficient.
And we also produce a lot of carbohydrates, grains and pulses, and that takes up a lot of territory. And weirdly enough, we underproduce fruits and vegetables to the point people don't eat enough of them. It really breaks down to a lot of ways. The broccoli lobby isn't a very powerful political force, whereas the cattle lobby really is, and the sugar lobby really is. And so we kind of focus on the wrong things, and we know this is causing trouble to the planet's biosphere in terms of climate change and biodiversity loss. So we're not in great shape on Earth, and we know that, but we do have a lot of potential.
Newman is also the co-author of the book Dinner on Mars. She says that advances scientists are making in order for humans to one day exist on a planet like Mars can also be applied to improve the current food production model we have on Earth. She says in many ways we've been spoiled with our planet's bountiful ecosystems. On Mars, resources are much more limited, and humans will be forced to be extremely efficient. This means categories like beef, chicken, pork, seafood, and dairy are much more of a delicacy rather than a standard part of the human diet. Instead, she says everyone will primarily be plant-based.
It's too far to send food. It costs too much to get things there. And so you have to produce everything there. And you have the raw building blocks. You have sunlight, even though it's weaker. You have water. You'll have an energy source, hopefully, probably maybe nuclear is one potential, or at least solar. But you don't have a lot else other than the raw chemicals. And so what we're going to have to do is build a food system from the ground up without the help of Earth's ecosystems.
On Mars, a key part of food production would be the planet's soil. Newman points out this matter is actually a bit toxic in its natural form, but can be chemically treated and processed in order to make it habitable for plants.
We would create the building blocks for hydroponic growing, and we do talk a lot about how there'd just be plants everywhere. Plants would dominate the Martian environment. And to be honest, they're a lot easier to keep alive even than the humans. And they'll also support an ecosystem of yeast, bacteria, fungus that produce proteins, dairy proteins, animal proteins, but not with live animals. And those technologies are advancing rapidly on Earth. So I think that's really the food system is going to look a lot like plants, fruit, and proteins, and with a little bit of grain and pulse, but it's going to be really hard to do because you need area for that. So probably the thing that's cheapest on Earth, the carbohydrates, is actually going to be one of the trickiest pieces to get on Mars.
You might be wondering, where's the water to grow these crops coming from? Newman says there is water on the Martian planet, but it's not as free-flowing as it is on our home planet.
It exists as ice in craters in the north, and we also feel there's a certain amount of water in the soil itself. And so we're going to have to mine the water, which is kind of what we do on Earth. If you think about it, it's just way easier here. So any water that we bring into the system, it's going to take energy. So you're going to really want to make sure we don't accidentally throw it away somehow. So there'll be constant water processing, but ideally, those systems will get very efficient very quickly.
She also points to certain indoor farming facilities on Earth that could one day be replicated on Mars. Newman says that growing crops like corn on Mars would be exceptionally difficult because it takes up so much space.
Some of the Canadian grain regions, they're bigger than European countries. And that means that those products are really cheap, and so we eat a lot of them. And so my go-to comfort meal is sometimes a nice plate of pasta. But on Mars, every inch of territory is going to be incredibly valuable because it's not like we can just grow them outside. We have probably most everything will be grown in tunnels, at least at first. And we'll also perhaps get to the point where we can dome over some small craters and then maybe have something that looks a little more like a conventional farm. But grain is such an intensive, like an expansive crop compared to a lot of other things. So we may be growing some lentils and stuff, things that are a little more compact. But yeah, that wheat is going to be probably a special occasion food because boy, is it ever going to take a lot of effort to recreate what happens very easily on a prairie on Earth.
The future of agriculture is full of innovation and wonder. As scientists push the envelope on exploring deeper into space, this same technology can be applied back home. Who knows what a home-cooked meal on Mars in 2124 will look like? Hopefully, there's some tasty plant-based Martian meat. To find out more about this topic and our guest Lenore Newman, head to viewpointsradio.org. This segment originally aired in October 2022 and was written by our executive producer, Amira Zaveri. Our lead producer is Libby Foster, studio production by Jason Dickey. I'm Gary Price.